Okay, so you want to own a cell phone network. You've seen the bill. Everyone pays it, nobody escapes it, and it goes up a little more every year. That looks like the best business on earth. A product every human on the continent needs and can't cancel. Here's the strange part. Building a nationwide network is one of the most expensive things a private company can attempt. Hundreds of billions of dollars in towers, spectrum, fiber, and equipment. The three American carriers pour tens of billions into it every single year, forever, just to stand still. And yet, the company that actually owns the most profitable part of your phone bill doesn't sell phone plans, doesn't have a store, and has probably never spoken to a customer in its life. You've never heard its name. It owns the tower. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your phone bill is what it is. Why three companies control almost everything. Why the discount carrier you switch to is usually owned by the expensive carrier you left. And who, at the very top of this whole structure, collects rent from all of them and gets a raise, automatically, every single year, whether the networks succeed or fail. Let's go shopping. So you want to build a network. Before you sell a single plan, you need three things, and none of them are cheap. The first is spectrum. This is the invisible product, the radio frequencies your phone actually uses to talk to a tower. You don't buy spectrum from a store. You buy it from the government, at auction, and the numbers are absurd. In the United States, a single major spectrum auction can raise over $80 billion for thin slices of air. You are, quite literally, paying billions of dollars to rent the right to use frequencies that already existed, floating invisibly over the country, before anyone thought to sell them. The second is the network itself. Towers, antennas, fiber running between them, switching centers, backup power. To cover a country the size of the United States, you're not building a few thousand towers. You're building and maintaining well over 100,000 sites, and you never stop. Every new generation, 3G, 4G, 5G, and whatever comes next, means climbing every tower and swapping the equipment. AT&T's 5G network alone covers more than 316 million people. That coverage did not happen once. It is happening continuously, forever, at enormous cost. The third is the part nobody thinks about. The customers cost money to get and keep. Every subsidized phone, every switch to us and we'll pay off your device deal, every retail store, every ad during the football game, that's billions of dollars spent just to move customers from one identical network to another. Add it all up, and to seriously compete as a national carrier in America, you are looking at a business that requires tens of billions of dollars a year in ongoing investment. This is not a market you walk into. It is a fortress. And the walls of that fortress are the whole point, because they explain everything about your bill. So let's say you've done the impossible. You've raised the tens of billions. You've bought spectrum. You've built towers. You've hired an army of retail staff. You're ready to compete. Now here's the bill nobody warned you about. You don't actually own most of the towers your network runs on. This is the part that breaks people's brains, so let's go slowly. When you picture a wireless carrier, you picture the towers, those steel structures by the highway, with the antennas bolted to the top. You assume Verizon owns Verizon's towers. AT&T owns AT&T's towers. They mostly don't. Over the last 2 decades, the American carriers sold off their towers, tens of thousands of them, to specialized companies, and then signed long-term leases to keep using the very towers they used to own. They took a big pile of cash up front, took the towers off their books, and in exchange, agreed to pay rent, for decades, on the infrastructure that is the physical foundation of their entire business. So the moment you finish building your network, you discover the same trap every carrier is already in. Your single largest, most unavoidable, permanently rising cost is rent, paid to a landlord who builds nothing, sells nothing, and answers to no customer. And you cannot leave, because your entire network is bolted to their steel. Hold that thought, because that landlord is where this entire story is heading. Reveal 1. The phone plan is barely the business. Look at what a carrier actually earns from you. The industry measures it with a number called ARPU, average revenue per user, the average monthly bill per customer. In America, for the major carriers, that number sits somewhere around $50 to $60 a month for a post-paid phone line. AT&T reports a post-paid phone ARPU around $56. Verizon and T-Mobile are in the same neighborhood. $56 a month, times over 100 million subscribers, is a river of cash. The U.S. wireless industry pulls in over $330 billion a year. But here's the thing about that river. It barely moves. Wireless service revenue in America is essentially flat. It grows by low single digits, if at all. Everybody already has a phone. You cannot sell more phones to a country that is already saturated. So the carriers are locked in a knife fight over the same customers, spending billions to steal each other's subscribers, and the total pie barely grows. That's not a growth business. That's a trench war, which raises the question, if the carriers are stuck in a trench war over a pie that doesn't grow, where does the actual money go? Reveal 2. There are only 3 of them, and that is not an accident. In the United States, after years of mergers, the national wireless market is essentially 3 companies: Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. That's it. When T-Mobile absorbed Sprint, 4 became 3. 3 competitors is a very specific number. It is small enough that nobody has to say a word to anyone. When one carrier raises prices, the others don't undercut them to steal customers. They quietly raise prices too, because why start a price war that shrinks everyone's margins? Economists have a polite phrase for this: coordinated behavior. You don't need a secret meeting. You just need 3 players who all understand that peace is more profitable than war. And here's how you know it's real. Watch what happens when there are 4. Reveal 3. The discount brand you escaped to is usually owned by the company you escaped from. You got sick of your big carrier's bill, so you switched to a cheaper brand, a scrappy little value carrier with a fun name. Good for you. Except, very often, that scrappy little brand is owned by one of the big 3. The value brands, the prepaid brands, the fighter brands, a huge number of them are subsidiaries of the exact same companies charging premium prices at the front door. It's the same network, the same towers, the same corporate parent, just a different logo for the customers who were about to leave. You didn't escape the landlord. You just moved into the cheaper apartment in the same building he owns. Real competition, a genuine 4th company that doesn't answer to the big 3, is the one thing that actually moves prices. And we have the receipt for that, and it's north of the border. Reveal 4. Look at Canada, the same machine, with the volume turned all the way up. Canada runs on the same 3-player structure: Rogers, Bell, and TELUS, the big 3, and Canadians pay some of the highest wireless prices in the developed world. For years, international studies ranked Canada's mobile prices at or near the very top of the entire world. Why? The same reason: more concentrated. When Canada's competition regulator studied the market, it found that in the specific regions where a genuine independent competitor existed, prices were substantially lower, and where the market was just the big 3, prices were higher, driven by what it called coordinated behavior among Bell, TELUS, and Rogers. You can watch it happen in real time. Independent trackers in Canada have documented the big 3 raising prices in near lockstep. One carrier lifts plans by $5, and within days the others match it. And the value brands? Same trick as America. Many of Canada's budget carriers are owned by the very big 3 companies they appear to compete with. And here is the 2026 punchline. In June of 2026, Canada's telecom regulator banned the hated $80 activation fee, a fee the carriers charged you just for the privilege of starting service. A win for consumers. Except within days, the big carriers rolled out a new fee, a roughly $40 device handling charge, plus a new SIM fee, quietly clawing back most of what the ban took away. Read that again. The government banned the fee. The fee came back wearing a different hat. Because when 3 companies control the market, you cannot regulate the fee away. You can only make it change its name. Reveal 5. And now, finally, the landlord. The company at the top of the whole structure. Remember the towers the carriers sold off and now rent back? Those towers are owned, in enormous numbers, by a handful of companies you've never heard of, the largest being American Tower and Crown Castle. And here is the beautiful, brutal genius of what they are. They are not phone companies. They are landlords. Legally, they're structured as real estate investment trusts, the same structure as a company that owns apartment buildings or shopping malls. Because that's exactly what they are. They own the land and the steel. The carriers are just tenants. Now look at how the business works, because it is the most elegant money machine in this entire video. A single tower is expensive to build, but once it's up, you can bolt the antennas of multiple carriers onto the same structure. So the landlord builds one tower and rents space on it to Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile, all three, on the same steel, at the same time. The tower costs the same to build, whether it has one tenant or three. But with 3 tenants paying rent, the profit margins are extraordinary. Crown Castle reported that its 3 biggest tenants, the same big 3 carriers, made up around 90% of its rental revenue. One tower, 3 rivals, all paying the same landlord. And the leases are long, stretching years, often decades, into the future. With one detail written into the contract that is the whole game, the rent goes up automatically by roughly 3% every single year, forever. Not because costs rose, not because the tower got better, because the contract says so. So while the 3 carriers fight their trench war over a pie that doesn't grow, spending billions to steal each other's customers, the landlord underneath all 3 of them collects rent from every one of them, on the same steel, with a guaranteed raise every year, and does not care in the slightest which carrier you choose, because you're renting from him no matter what. Now, before you conclude this landlord can't lose, open the disaster file, because there is exactly one way this machine breaks, and it just happened. The tower landlord's entire business rests on one assumption, that there will always be big, solvent tenants to pay the rent. Their nightmare isn't a recession, it's a tenant disappearing. For years, the great hope for a 4th American carrier was a company called Dish, building a new network from scratch and signing long-term tower leases to do it. Then, in early 2026, Dish, now under EchoStar, walked away. It defaulted on its tower leases. Crown Castle disclosed that the loss cut roughly $220 million from a single year's guidance. American Tower took a hit around $200 million a year. The landlords are now in court trying to claw back the rent. That's the crack. When the number of tenants shrinks from 4 toward 3, the landlord loses a payer and the country loses its best shot at real price competition, the exact thing that lowers your bill. The failure of the 4th carrier is bad for the landlord for 1 year. It is bad for you for a decade. But notice how small the crack is. The landlord lost 1 tenant and still has the other 3 on the same towers, with the automatic raises still ticking. A bad year, not a broken machine. So here's the machine, fully assembled. Follow the money up the chain. You pay your bill, $50, $60, $70 a month, to one of 3 carriers. You think you chose. You didn't really. The prices are nearly identical, because 3 players don't fight, they coordinate. If you flee to a discount brand, you usually flee to a brand the same company owns. The carriers take your money and fight each other for more of it, spending billions on ads and phone subsidies to steal subscribers back and forth across a pie that never grows. And out of that river of money, the single largest unavoidable cost, the rent on the towers, flows down, past all 3 carriers, to a landlord who owns the steel, rents it to all 3 rivals at once, and raises the rent automatically every year, forever. The customers supply the money, the carriers supply the war, and the landlord supplies a tower and collects from everyone. But there's one more thing, and this is the tell. Who owns the landlord? The tower companies are REITs, which means they're traded on the stock market, and by law, They must pay out most of their profit to shareholders as dividends. So the real owners at the very top are pension funds, index funds, institutional investors. The quiet, patient money that doesn't want to run a phone company, doesn't want the ads or the retail stores or the price war. It just wants the rent check. The most profitable position in the entire wireless industry isn't selling you a phone plan, it's owning the ground the phone plan stands on and never touching a customer at all. So let's close the ledger. 2 futures. Scenario 1. The price war heats up. A carrier gets aggressive, slashes prices, and everyone's margins get squeezed. Bad for the carriers, good for you, finally. But the tower landlord? The rent is locked in by contract. The carriers can bleed each other white on plan prices, and every one of them still owes the same rent on the same towers, with the same automatic 3% raise. The landlord doesn't feel your price war at all. Scenario 2. The market stays calm. 3 players, no real competition. Prices drift gently upward every year. Fees get banned and quietly return under new names. The carriers make comfortable money. And the landlord, sitting underneath all of them, makes comfortable money too. More of it every year. Guaranteed. Run both futures side by side, and you get the only sentence that matters. In a price war, the landlord wins. In a quiet market, the landlord wins. The carriers fight over who gets the customers. The landlord already won, because he owns the thing the fight is standing on. There's an old idea in business. In a gold rush, don't dig for gold. Sell the shovels. The tower companies read a smarter version. They didn't sell the shovels. They bought the ground. And now they charge every miner rent to stand on it, and raise it every year, no matter who strikes gold and who goes home broke. You pay your bill, and you think the fight is between 3 phone companies. It isn't. The 3 phone companies are the tenants. The fight you're watching, the ads, the deals, the switch to us, is just tenants competing over who gets to pay the landlord. The customers pay. The carriers war. The landlord collects. And the next time you look at your phone bill and wonder why it never really goes down, remember that a piece of it is rent, flowing to a company with no store, no plan, and no name you'd recognize, that owns a tower you'll never see and gets a raise every year for doing nothing at all. And that raises a bigger question, one that goes far beyond your phone, because the towers aren't the only invisible infrastructure quietly owned by a landlord who collects from everyone and answers to no one. It's happening with the pipes under your city, the data centers behind your apps, the power lines to your house. That's the pattern. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Subscribe, because next, we follow the money into the ground itself.